Ever feel like the universe is kind of like one of those gadgets you get with no instruction manual?
Wow.
Like, where's the meaning of life button? Well, today we're diving into a topic that tackles that head on. Existential nihilism. Ready to unpack this?
Absolutely, and it's a deep dive indeed because it really makes us ask those big, sometimes uncomfortable questions about why we're here, what it all means, if it even does.
Exactly, and I can't think of a better place to start than with the philosopher who kind of dropped a bomb on the philosophical world. Nietzsche. God is dead, he famously declared. But he wasn't just making a comment about religion. Right?
Right, it wasn't about a deity kicking the bucket. Nietzsche was talking about a seismic shift in belief. The old ways of making sense of the world, the moral frameworks, they were crumbling and leaving this void.
So less about a guy in the sky, more about the ground disappearing beneath our feet. What happens when those old structures that gave us purpose, meaning they just vanish?
That's the unsettling yet I think intriguing space that existential nihilism wants us to explore. Without those pre-packaged answers, are we really just adrift in a meaningless universe? Camus, another big name in this realm, wrestled with this through his idea of the absurd.
And by absurd, he didn't mean like a whoopee cushion kind of absurd, did he? What did Camus mean by that?
It's that clash between our very human, very deep need to find meaning, purpose, and the universe just seemingly shrugging at us, like staring into a cosmic mirror and seeing nothing reflected back. No judgment, no guideposts, just the raw fact of existence.
Yeah, enough to give anyone a philosophical anxiety attack, right? And to really drive this home, Camus uses the myth of Sisyphus. The guy eternally pushing that boulder uphill only to have it roll back down. This wasn't just some ancient workout routine, was it?
Not at all. Sisyphus becomes the symbol of our existential struggle, this endless striving for something that might ultimately be pointless. It throws out the question. If the universe doesn't care about our efforts, if there's no cosmic scorecard, how do we even begin to deal with that?
Yeah, do we just wave the white flag and say, well, it's all meaningless, might as well binge watch TV? Or are there other, maybe tougher, but ultimately more fulfilling ways to approach this?
You've hit a nerve there. Giving in, surrendering to despair, that's the easy way out. But Camus offered another path. He called it rebellion. But not against some external enemy, but against the very idea that we're powerless in the face of this apparent meaninglessness.
So it's about staring that absurdity in the face, not running from it, and then choosing how we show up in a world that might not offer us inherent meaning. I can feel the weight of that responsibility already.
Exactly, and that weight, that responsibility, that's what leads us to another giant in existential thought, Jean-Paul Sartre and his idea of radical freedom.
And I'm getting the feeling this isn't the free toy in your cereal box kind of freedom, is it? This is something way more.
Absolutely. Sartre argued that we're not born with some predetermined purpose, no cosmic instruction manual. We just are. And it's through the choices we make, the actions we take, that we actually define ourselves. We create our own essence. It is freeing, isn't it? But also, yeah, kind of terrifying. We become the sole authors of our own meaning, like artists with a blank canvas.
But if we're talking about a blank canvas with no one to tell us what's good or bad, beautiful or ugly, doesn't that make it all kind of, well, arbitrary? Like, if the universe doesn't care about the meaning we create, does it really matter?
And that brings us right up against another existential cliff edge, death. If it all ends eventually, if our time is finite, does anything we do really stick around, really mean something in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, that's a thought that can keep you up at night.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about how vast the cosmos is. Our planet, our entire history, it's just a blip in the grand scheme of things. Easy to feel kind of insignificant, right?
It's a natural reaction, that feeling of insignificance. When you zoom out to the cosmic perspective, even all of humanity's achievements can seem, well, kind of fleeting, like a quick burst on a radar screen. And if there's no inherent meaning already out there, that realization can be, well, a lot to process.
Makes you want to pull the covers over your head and hide, right?
Yeah.
And as if that wasn't enough, then there's the problem of suffering. Evil. Not exactly light topics for a deep dive.
Definitely not. And this is where things get even more complicated for this idea of a meaningful universe. I mean, if there was some master plan, some benevolent force calling the shots, wouldn't things be, a bit less harsh?
Right. If there was an all-powerful, all-loving being in charge, you'd think they'd maybe, I don't know, step in during a natural disaster, prevent some of the, well, just awful things that happen. It's hard to square that much suffering with a universe that actually cares, isn't it?
And that's the heart of what existential nihilism is pushing us to confront. The randomness of it all, the universe not seeming to care about our human struggles, maybe, just maybe, it lends weight to the idea that there isn't some preordained meaning. At least not in the way we usually think about it.
It's a lot to get your head around, for sure. But before we spiral into despair, what about some counter-arguments?
Hmm.
A lot of people find meaning in human progress, right? Our achievements, art, science, literature, don't those things point to something inherently meaningful about us?
That's a key point. This drive we have to create, to build, to discover, it's often seen as a powerful counter to the bleakness of nihilism. And it's true, these things bring us joy, purpose, a sense of accomplishment. But do they definitively prove some objective, universal meaning? That's the question.
So we're not saying those achievements are meaningless, but how do they stack up against the idea of inherent meaning? Especially in a universe that might just be indifferent to it all.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even our most amazing creations are still, at the end of the day, human constructs. We're the ones giving them value, finding meaning in them. The universe, well, as far as we know, it doesn't really have a preference between a Mozart symphony and, say, the sound of waves crashing on a beach.
Kind of humbling when you put it like that. So what about those really personal sources of meaning? Relationships, experiences, the things that make us us? Surely those have inherent value.
Of course, the bonds we form, the love we share, the experiences that shape us, they mean the world to us as humans. But again, through that purely nihilistic lens, even that meaning is subjective, created within the bubble of our human experience.
Okay, so where does that leave us? If even those deeply personal things are ultimately our own creations, what then? Are we just doomed to a meaningless existence?
That is a million-dollar question, right? And there are no easy answers. But that's part of why this whole existential nihilism thing is so fascinating. It pushes us to face those huge questions, to accept that maybe there isn't a pre-written script, no cheat codes for the universe.
It's both terrifying and exciting, isn't it? Kind of like being on the edge of a vast, unexplored ocean. Do we cling to the safety of the shore, to the idea of preordained meaning? Or do we build a ship and set sail into the unknown?
And that, I think, is at the very heart of it all. We get to choose. Even in a universe that might not have inherent meaning, we have the power, maybe even the responsibility, to be our own compass, to navigate by our own stars.
So it's not about giving in to despair, right? It's more like accepting that lack of inherent meaning, but then going, okay, I get to decide what matters.
Exactly. It's acknowledging that maybe the universe doesn't hand us meaning on a silver platter, but we create it. Through what we do, how we connect with others, how we choose to be in the world. It's not coming from outside, it's coming from within.
It becomes a choice then, not just blindly following some path laid out for us, but actively building a life based on what we value, which is empowering, sure, but also kind of daunting. Like, where do we even begin if we're talking about creating meaning in a potentially meaningless existence?
It starts with, I think, being really honest with ourselves, facing those big questions we usually avoid about existence, about our purpose, and being okay with not having all the answers, with that uncertainty.
It's like getting comfortable with those questions, letting them shape how we see ourselves in the world. It's realizing that the how-to guide for life, we're writing it as we go. Every choice we make adds a new page.
Exactly. And the amazing thing about that is it opens up so many possibilities. If we're not bound by some predetermined plan, we're free to explore, to experiment, to figure out what really matters to us on our own terms.
It's a journey then, constantly discovering, constantly creating ourselves. And each experience, each interaction, each choice we make, it all feeds into that. It's about embracing that freedom and, yeah, that responsibility of being the authors of our own meaning.
And within that, I think that's where we find the possibility for a really authentic, fulfilling life. It's not about getting to the right answers, because with existential nihilism, those might not exist, at least not in any absolute sense. It's more about asking the right questions, the ones that spark our curiosity, make us challenge what we think we know, and keep us moving forward on this journey of figuring out who we are.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've gone deep into, well, the depths of existential nihilism, and it can be a bit unsettling. But hopefully we've given our listeners some new ways to think about these ideas, some new tools to navigate them.
Because in the end, it's not about arriving at a final answer, but about really leaning into the journey itself. The questioning, the exploring, the continual process of creating and refining what meaning is for us, even in a universe that might not give us any guarantees.
So, to our listeners out there, what if you embraced, just for a moment, the idea that maybe there isn't some grand, preordained meaning? What then?
What values would you choose to live by? What kind of story would you write with the time you have? Think about it. And remember, even in a universe that might be meaningless, your existence can be profoundly meaningful. Until next time, keep exploring.